but like we need farmers to be the influence because they're the ones, that'll have to do it, but they're the ones that put the resilience into the system because they're the ones that when the problems arise, they don't take no for an answer. They solve it.
And welcome back to another episode of the Bites and Bytes Podcast, where we talk about food, agriculture, and the tech shaping both without getting too buzzworthy about it. I am your host, Kristin. Today's guest is Colson Steber, co-CEO of Qlarity Access and AgTech. He brings nearly 2 decades of real-world experience in market research, helping some of the biggest names in ag figure out what farmers actually want before throwing more tech at them. We talk about precision farming, the shifting identity of the modern farmer, why trust matters more than pitch decks, and how sustainability means something totally different depending on who you're asking. So settle in. This is a good one. Welcome to this episode. Well, welcome, everybody, back to the Bites and Bytes podcast. I've got an amazing guest today who's going to talk to us about some market research and some other fun things. But before all of that, let's jump into what's your favorite food and your favorite food memory?
Favorite food by far is pizza. Always grew up loving it. Worked making pizza all through college. I was the guy in the corner window tossing hundreds of pizzas while people would take videos of it. And I've perfected my own homemade pizza recipe for the last 15 years. And food memory would be a couple years ago, last minute in New York City, my wife and I landed dinner at 1111, which is an 11-course plant-based meal that, front of house service was the most incredible experience I've ever had at a restaurant. And the food was amazing. Something that has a dish called Celebration of Tomatoes is I'm in. And then 4 of the dishes, they actually prepped at the table as an interactive experience. So it wins both most expensive and greatest memory, but it was well worth the once in a lifetime chance to get to do.
That's amazing. I knew it immediately when you said it. I was like, oh, I'm so jealous, but that's good to hear that it was worth the hype, right? So that's awesome. It is amazing. So what kind of pizza toppings?
Well, I'm oftentimes like a pepperoni banana pepper person. Okay. But I can do a lot of variation. The pizza place I worked at was known for cutting its own toppings extra thick and layering them on. So that's definitely how I like it.
That's awesome. I had a guest who also said pizza was his favorite food, and he's a pizza connoisseur. So he took this pizza history of pizza tour in New York City. I'll have to send it to you later, but it's super cool to get into the science of temperature.
I've worked for a true owned by Jersey guy, Jersey style pizza shop, and learned how to make pizza right. That pizza was actually better than the pizza that I spent years making.
Wow.
But it was very cool to learn from a master.
That's amazing. I love that when people have this is what I did, and then I've perfected it for my own life now. That's awesome. I'd like to say that I had some type of experience when I was in food service for 5 years, back when I was in my early 20s. But no, I don't eat any of that food that I served, probably. I wouldn't even go near it now.
Probably a good idea.
Yeah, it was a pizza chain, but also I worked at a steakhouse, and I just, I like steak, I like pizza, but I don't want it anywhere like it was there. No, thank you. All set. I think my palate has refined over the years. Sounds like yours did too.
Yes.
But that's great. Go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Colson Steber, founder and co-CEO of Qlarity Access and AgTech, because about half of our business is in the agriculture sector, and we're a market research insights consultancy. So we're helping the biggest companies make the best and most informed decision based off of getting the input from their customers. I am, my own personal mantra is relentless intentional action. And over the course of the 9 years that are 5 different acquisitions of companies to get to who we are today, I've very much worked to figure out like, who am I and what is my sense of purpose? And because I believe that like we achieve at the level of what I become as an entrepreneur, and that's absolutely been true. And it's amazing to see the transformation within the business, within our team, and what we create for our customers.
Definitely. You guys have definitely expanded from the beginning as well. I mean, you have AgAccess, is it Vet Access? There's all kinds of different avenues that you've run, which is awesome. Like, I love when people are eclectic and they have a lot of offering rather than just one straight niche. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, I'm a niche podcast, but like it's still important to like expand beyond that, because we live in an interconnected world, not just because of the digital technology that runs through us, but everything's interconnected. And if you have a systems thinking mindset on it, so that's great.
Yeah, I built those systems for us to add unique value, where like we have one proven process, right? And it's simply that it's best executed on when it's very targeted to the audiences you serve and the problems you solve, and therefore the industry that you're in. And so agriculture and veterinary animal health work is nearly 2/3 of what our company does. And we've built up a lot of knowledge around it over the last over decades.
That's so cool. Like, I don't know. I'm such a research geek. Like, I'm one of those people that would grab like research papers and a highlighter and be really happy. So I really appreciate what people are doing. So for the audience, because I know people get confused about what this is, can you explain what market research is within this ag space so people understand like what we're going to discuss?
Yeah. So if you're a major input provider, seed manufacturer, like equipment company, and you're going to actually bring a product to market, like imagine, CNH or John Deere is going to launch a new tractor. That is a multi-$100 million capital investment to bring to market. And across the course of that life cycle of research and development and go to market, you're going to want to be sure to ask questions for feedback to your engineers, to your marketing, to your product teams of the farmers that you ultimately expect to utilize what it is you're going to put out there. And we act as that independent third-party researcher that goes to the farmer and what works to really deeply understand what it is their needs are and how the solution that's being provided will actually meet the needs, and how will it get communicated to them in a way that works and empower confident decisions back with that manufacturer, so that when there's a degree of certainty and confidence gained through the process that what they're investing in is going to be worth it.
Great. Thank you for explaining that. Oh, let's just talk about the farmers for a minute. Have you seen a trend over the time frame of doing with this research of what farmers care about now versus what they cared about before?
I think to answer your question, I'll provide a specific example of one that I have a point of view on around like AgTech adoption and things, because that's something that's representative over the past 15 years of my doing this, where you saw, we've all seen hundreds of ag technology solutions, both from industry insiders and other people deciding that they are going to bestow farmers with the greatest thing that's going to solve their issue they didn't want to solve or didn't actually have come into the market. And investment makes sense because it is where the next opportunity lied, right? If you went down the track of GMOs and getting glyphosate and everything of 30 plus years ago, you're now in this stage where like technology is the answer, but the actual efficacy of the treatment it was not where it had to be in order for the farmer to know that it definitively serves them. But if you see where the technology is, where I'm going to be prescriptive and apply new fertilizers and crop protection chemicals at the most granular level down to the plant, and you realize the incredible efficiency that creates and the efficacy of it actually working as it's supposed to, that has really, the lines been crossed just inside of recent years, where now it's there. And there's the reality of the durability of those systems being able to work in field and be relied upon. Like, that has now led to a huge shift in how production happens, how it gets done, and even the farmer's view of technology. One of the things we sometimes talk about is because the majority of farms are still family owned, but these are now extremely valuable pieces of property and businesses that have these massive capital investments tied up in them. That is so much, we sometimes see this kind of skip a generation where the farmer that is still farming right now, that's in their late 70s, early 80s, they're having to work very much so with their grandson to actually understand and bring that up. And it's just not, that has evolved dramatically over the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. Wow. That was actually a really great answer. Completely hear all that. Technology, or AgTech specifically, has really exploded over the last X amount of years here. I think people don't realize how much of the food system is run by technology or has a technology component to it. As consumers, we have no idea because we don't need to know. Just our food gets to us, right? So it's not a big deal for us. What I think is interesting is the big push for, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, for more first generation farmers to come into the market space or to come into farming. And it's been really hard because people don't want to do that. However, I do think that technology will make it fun and cool and nerdy in a way for people to come into farming as a first gen farmer, because they see it as a little bit less manual labor and more technology focused. Are you seeing that kind of trend running around as well? And again, this is just me being really super curious.
I hope it's a trend. I have observed what you're talking about. I mean, it is critically important, right? The farmer has always been defined by that work ethic of the farmer, that your identity is as a farmer, and you quite literally, it's not a matter of if you're going to wake before dawn and finish after dusk. It's that is life. And that's just more broadly not how our current generations coming into the workforce actually view their relationship to their work at all. And yet with the technology, that their reality is that there are the definition of what a farmer is changing and will continue to. And there's no doubt that the next, we're essentially diminishing in terms of the number of people that are involved within the agriculture sector. And we're already ever increasing in the average age. I think it's now over 60.
Yes.
And that's invariably marching us towards redefining how agriculture work roles work. And honestly, the ability to continue to perform is dependent upon there being people with the skills to utilize the tech to actually see what has to happen actually happen.
Yeah, it scares me too, because with technology, we tend to run before we crawl or even walk or any of that. We tend to throw tech at problems and not think about the privacy implications or the cybersecurity implications of putting this tech into various places. And then something happens and it's sort of like a rollback moment of, we probably should have done this ahead of time and thought about all this. And this is what scares me as a cybersecurity professional: is farmers are not equipped to handle cybersecurity incidents. They're equipped to farm, regardless of what their age is. That's what they do. It's that lifestyle, as you mentioned. And the more tech we toss, the more I get worried about, are farmers going to have to be technology professionals as well as farming professionals in the future? And to me, the answer is yes. They'll have to do both. That doesn't mean they necessarily will troubleshoot their tech, but maybe they will, because farmers had to become mechanics, right, for their tractors, and they still are, or any other functionality. It's such a multi-hat type role. People don't realize that they really do it all, birth animals and care for crops and deal with water and pests and invasive species and predators and all these other things. I mean, the creativity of being a farmer, I think, isn't celebrated or acknowledged enough. And that, I'm sure, has come out in some of the research you've done and your company has done. and seeing that there's so many different avenues of just farming and agriculture in itself, because agriculture extends beyond just the land. It includes fleets of ships and all kinds of other things like that. And how we do precision farming, like you mentioned already, or how vertical farming and greenhouses and all these other things that are super technology driven and interesting. And I don't think we're going to be able to feed the world if we don't start doing more of that. Hey there. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Bites and Bytes podcast. I just wanted to take a moment to say, wow, we hit 10,000 downloads for the show. That is totally wild. Whether you've been here since the first episode, like an OG, or it's your first time listening, thank you so much for being here. Truly, thank you. This show keeps growing because of curious, thoughtful listeners like you, and I'm so grateful to keep learning alongside you, exploring food and agriculture through the lens of technology, risk, and all the weird, wonderful connections in between. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with your friends, coworkers, or anybody else you think needs to hear this. It helps more than you know. Also, little side note, kind of a big deal, I am writing a book. It's called Securing What Feeds Us. Well, that's the working title for now. And it will be published in autumn of 2026 by Wiley Publishing. I know that sounds really far off, but trust me, I need every bit of that time. If you want to be the first to hear about the cover, launch events, giveaways, and behind the scenes chaos, you can sign up for updates on the link in the show notes. And if you want more extended thoughts and a sneak peek behind the curtain, including my existential crisis of writing a book, you can find me on Substack. That link is also in the show notes. Now back to the episode. What are you seeing as like a challenge moving forward? Like what are the challenges we're seeing with various different types of ag tech and agriculture in general? I mean, you've already listed a couple, Colson. You've mentioned the age gap, that issue. We need more first gen farmers. But is there anything else that's kind of been seeping through? That's a bit of this is a challenge. We don't know what we're going to do with this yet.
One of the biggest challenges that I see is that we're faced with constantly, because so much of the research that we're looking to do is to understand what the farmer's perspective will be about how they're measuring value and whether they'll actually make a purchase decision based upon it. And where we're asked to ask the farmer over and over and over again across every single category of decision that they have, essentially to get kind of a share of wallet of, like, at the end of the day, there's just yield and the price that I'm going to get. And the economics of being a farmer are like brutally hard, because there's so much outside of, there's not basic economic supply and demand of crops to things. There's now so much going on in commodity markets and in global competition that there's not a lot to be done to affect price. Even the biggest farms that have financial managers that are hedging and doing things are immensely challenged with how are we going to make sure that we get the dollar out of the yield that we do produce. And the economics of, like, if you were to say, I'm going to go start up a farm today, right? Mm-hmm. Like, depending on where you are, that could be a $40,000 to $100,000 plus, like, per acre price for the acreage. You legitimately need somewhere around $3 to $5 million of equipment to run a decent sized farm. You really cannot economically run, certainly a corn and soy operation, with under 1,000 acres and think that you're going to, like, sustain a business. Everything's been financed to the hilt, and there's immense financial pressure, like financing pressure associated with the interest rates you're paying and stuff. Like, farmers are in this incredibly protective state where they essentially do not want to do anything outside of what is protected by the Farm Bill, because they're in such a vulnerable place, as we see over and over and over again, right? Somewhere in the country, there's some sort of major weather event or new pest that comes in, and it creates, like, that downward cycle that there's really no reprieve to recover from outside of it. I think that's the thing, right? Is, like, where we have technology. We get a lot of AgTech company customers that are from outside of the industry, and they're just like, oh, but it'll just be so easy because we'll just tell them that like they'll get more yield when they use this. And it's just like, there's no time and headspace in a farmer's head to deal with one more application or one more thing to weave into the 17 that they're already using.
It's a really good point. And you were making me think about the dairy industry, about how in order to keep the price of milk to a place that's profitable for them, they can't actually use all the milk that's produced. So they dump a lot of milk. I don't want people to freak out that they're dumping milk. The cows have to be milked several times a day. There's a lot of milk. And if you put a lot of milk into the market, it will decrease the value of milk. And that's the problem. You don't want to just be like milking cows and making, 50 cents on a dollar kind of vibe. You actually want to make money to be able to continue your operation. It's really complicated. There's a lot of, if the grain isn't grown right that year, it won't be for pasta, let's say, right? And that's like really high priced grain for pasta. Mm-hmm. It will end up being for chicken feed, which is low grain, and that will be low cost. I think there's so much pressure to make something, make a really good crop, make a really good yield that year. It's the premium of it is the complication part of it. And you have to deal with weather and extreme activism and all these other things like tariffs and other government regulations and all this other stuff and market trends and maybe you're taking a risk and you're growing something for the vegan population that year instead of, wheat or something like that. And then you're going to have to try that route. And what if that fails? And there's all these I can't imagine. It feels like Jenga with your farm field sometimes, I think. And that's terrifying because if you pull the wrong piece, it's over and you're mortgaging your house and you're mortgaging all your equipment. And then, an AgTech company comes in and they're like, hey, I can make your life really easy. And you're like, but do you know my problems? Do you understand what I'm going through? And I'm glad that you're steering research to say you really need to understand the farmer's lifestyle before you can just walk in and dump something in their lap. That's not going to work.
Right.
Hi, we're Ann Sage. And if you're in food production, agriculture, and even running a zoo or an aquarium, we need to talk. Because let's be honest, your operation relies on a lot more technology than most people realize. Grain dryers, hatchery controls, life support systems for animal habitats, all connected, all critical, all often overlooked when it comes to cybersecurity. That's where we come in. At Ann Sage, we help industries that grow, feed, and inspire the world manage cybersecurity and operational risks without the fear tactics, the fluff, or the 200-page audit you'll never read. Whether you're producing milk, processing seafood, or running life support systems, we focus on what matters, keeping your operation safe, your people protected, and your business running, even when things go sideways. And hey, we know not everyone on your team speaks cyber. And because not everyone on your team speaks cyber, we've created a free resource library at annsage.com. Inside, you'll find sector-specific infographics built for teams in agriculture, seafood, zoos, and aquariums. They're clear, practical, a little witty, and designed to help frontline teams understand the risks without needing a translator. No logins, no email required, no catch, just usable tools that make cybersecurity stick. If you're responsible for keeping food moving, animals safe, and systems online, Ann Sage is your partner in real-world resilience. Visit annsage.com to download your free infographics, book a consult, or just learn more about how we're helping critical infrastructures secure what matters most. Ann Sage, helping the industries that grow, feed, and inspire the world manage cybersecurity and operational risks.
I could give you so many examples of how you're growing strawberries and you have a delivery schedule. You're all on these you're going to plow under a decent number of fields. Look at what's happening in poultry right now with bird flu. Yes, the price is going up because obviously, but it's like beyond necessity, and whether that dollar is really being charged by the farmer in the way that it needs to be because of the exorbitant costs that they're incurring in the attempt to limit bird flu is challenging to see whether it's true or not.
It also is heartbreaking too when they have to cull a flock of chickens because they have tested positive. That is, I mean, yes, obviously that's the answer to that situation, but to know that a farmer lost that much money and time and effort and heart and soul in that flock of a huge amount of birds, 50,000 or whatever they were culling, that breaks my heart because they've basically got to start from scratch. And you have to raise those chickens up again, and everybody's like, oh, chicks are so cute. They are a pain to deal with. It's a very hard life. A chicken farmer is a hard life. And I don't think people understand how frustrating it is when you walk into the grocery store and you can't get eggs or you can't get chicken and you get mad. Imagine the people that are dealing with it on the ground zero of it. That is an entirely different experience. You can go have something else. Go have some beef, go have some fish, go have a carrot, go have something else. It frustrates me that people aren't seeing this for what it is, the basic human aspect of it. And also it's different per region as well. Are you doing global research too, Colson, or are you just staying in the US, North American side?
Yes, almost 3/4 of what we do is within North America. And I would say that's the stuff I'm closest to that I can provide a more informed opinion on.
No, that's fine. I think it's interesting because I know a little bit about the UK side of farming, and the way the farming space is over there is entirely different than our farming space. We've got obviously more land over here, hence larger country. But it's interesting how not everyone owns like a Columbine. They tend to rent them out and send them around to the farms. So there's like one per county, if you will, kind of thing. And I find that really interesting. And I'm wondering if at some point the US or North America in general will go to that kind of model. But then it dawned on me, not really. I mean, they might share it within a conglomerate of area, but we're just too big and our farms are too big in comparison. And then I think about like Brazil, which they do hectares of space. We have to take a helicopter to go from one end to the other. There's no way they're sharing anything. And it's really kind of too bad because I feel like the sense of community is lost a little bit there. But in your research with ag, is community a big factor, especially with the farmers, because they don't trust anybody? It's a very much, I don't know you. My friend Bob, the farmer down the street, does not know you. So I don't want you to come in. So how do you navigate trust? Because farmers are inherently distrusting, rightfully so. And they really do work within the community as a whole. So how do you help navigate these big organizations that come to you and explain to them that, hey, you have to kind of earn your way in? How do you get through that moment?
Thinking of a particular client, everything with the farmer begins with relationship. I will say that while there's a disproportionate command and control culture of the relationship being with the eldest, naturally out of the changes that I talked about over the last 10 to 15 years in AgTech, there is much more, there's a big shift in decision-making control within the last 3 or so years to that younger in their 30s and 40s. That's why I say sometimes it's skipping a generation. And the relationship with them is much more a business relationship. They don't do business with the insurance agent down the street only because their father or grandfather did for the last 50 years. There has to be real service delivery and real value, and they got to trust them because there's value in what it is they're being provided. And I would say that very much, how does that look and how do you deliver that message? And then what does meeting their needs so that they feel confident about their choice afterward? The interesting thing is, right, like once you get into that relationship, I mean, farmers are incredible brand advocates because they massively influence each other. And so like it generally requires that the long-term value establishment. Things don't move fast. Generally, things are on like an annual cycle, even amongst specialties that are harvested more often. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that was a great answer. I'm really excited about this. Farmers massively influence each other. I think that's great. They're kind of like the original influencers. You were making me think about it in terms of that. That's awesome. You don't think about that, but it's so true.
There's so much judgment about doing the new thing and the fact that your neighbor's going to see it and then they're going to and that is one of the biggest barriers to entry around like a new seed treatment being able to be adopted or a challenger brand coming in and doing something. And the willingness to like have empathy for that being the reality, that like it is a big deal that it is going to be compared against if you're going to do that test plot of one field.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point about social pressure. And I was thinking while you were talking about the solar flares that happened in this past year in 2014, about we took out the GPS for precision tractors in the upper Midwest and Canada, and how they had to roll back to analog to farm, and they had to bring in, the older generation, because the new generation, as you said, the one that skipped the generation kind of thing, they didn't know what to do without the precision GPS telling them exactly where they had to plant. So they had to go back to, old school, if you will. And I'm sure that the social pressures and the teasing and you really need to know how to do this without technology probably came into play, or that I told you so, this would happen vibes. But it worries me too, because this just opens up a whole new world for bad actors if they see how badly that damaged that situation. I mean, mimics are easy in that regard, I suppose. But yeah, I'm worried about that kind of thing, because again, we have a generation that's aging out and retiring, or should be retiring. And we have this new generation that's just bringing in all these things and doing all this stuff. And like you said, it changed the business direction and the value. But we're missing like that little piece. So there needs to be almost like this buffer, I guess. I'm not quite sure how that's going to happen, but it sounds like it will probably organically happen based on social pressure from others. Yeah, that's fabulous. Thanks, Colson. I really do appreciate that. Ever try managing industrial cybersecurity risk with spreadsheets? Yeah, we've been there too. At Anson OT, we're changing the game for OT risk management. No more clunky tools, no more siloed data, just a smarter, faster, and usable way to understand and reduce your risks, whether you're in food production, energy, manufacturing, or anywhere critical infrastructure keeps the world running. Built by folks who've lived the pain, literally conducting OT risk assessments worldwide, Anson OT brings together cybersecurity, safety, environmental, and industry-specific standards in one clear, intuitive platform. We're the first to combine AI-driven insights with scenario-based modeling, so you can not only see your current risk, but also be prepared for what could happen next. And with built-in playbooks, you won't be left scrambling when things go sideways. It's everything industrial cybersecurity management should be: simple, smart, and swift. Learn more at ansonot.com and see why critical infrastructure leaders trust us to help them stay operational, safe, and resilient. As we're wrapping up here, I would love to talk a little bit about what you think the future is going to be for research within these different companies. Like, what do you think is going to be the prevailing go-to-market type situation with this? What are ag companies going to be looking for? What are farmers going to be looking for? What do you think the future looks like? Let's just start there.
My initial response in my head to that is sustainability, but it is shocking how different the corporation view of sustainability is versus the farmer view is.
That's true.
I take more of the farmer side of looking at sustainability of like my family in this operation, sustainability of my land and its ability to produce, making sure from the corporate side and even down to the consumer trend side of realizing that in order to realize the change that we think we need to see in the world, we're going to have to meet those needs for the farmer in order for change to happen. Because like a great example, and working with like an irrigation company in California, and water's everything, is if I'm the worker and I have always set up the spigot hose and sprayed the entire field, and I know that works, and I have to keep all of this lettuce on schedule, the barrier to entry to switch to like drip line irrigation even, or like things that are absolutely proven in terms of the efficiency and effectiveness, is still massive, right? because I have to have a sure thing. And this is the practice that has always worked. And therefore, like, I have no motivation to switch, despite the fact that off this field, there's all sorts of pressure on the system more widely. Now, eventually, that, like, the way to get them to change is not to pressure them into, you're going, well, you're going to have less and less water, you're going to have to muck under fields and not farm, because there's pressure that the farm has to keep farming. So it's this, how do we approach sustainability? So I think to some of what you get into, if I were to expand on that, I actually think there will be immensely increased knowledge of food sourcing and like managing through an entire like blockchain management of food sourcing to where you're actually eating, because I think we're going to see some major issues arise over time as you see kind of like anything hits the news that gets somebody sick, and we do a phenomenal job of not getting anyone sick from the ag industry. And yet the likelihood that will continue is that there will be even bigger issues that actually cause gross change all the way back to the farm level is definitely there.
Yeah, I think what you're really describing is a systems thinking approach to how we actually do the life cycle of farming in terms of how do we keep it sustainable, both in practice and in practicality, and for future-proofing in a way. I mean, that ultimately is what sustainability is. But I think you're totally right about how corporate sees it differently. Not to plug myself, but I have a degree in environmental management, so I see sustainability differently. I see it more on the farm side rather than like the corporate side. And then when sustainability became a big deal in corporate land, which was like 10 years ago or whatever, I was sort of like, you can't do it in isolation. You don't even understand the system of manufacturing, but you want to do what? It was always a very weird conversation for me, because if you don't understand your processes, your legacy, you've mentioned that immediately with the irrigation company, and anything to do with your people and process, you can't just throw more tech at it. It's not going to work. You can't change the process without understanding what it is right now, because what it is right now might work really great. It might just need a tweak here or a little enhance here. But ultimately, farming is, as a practice, has been for generation upon generation since we figured out how to do it. The practice of farming is altered and changed, but ultimately it's still the same thing. You put a seed in the ground and it grows food, or you raise an animal and you take it to slaughter and you have meat. You know, we have to get back to the basics here instead of just overcomplicating it with more things. I mean, we didn't even bring up AI, but that's going to dominate moving forward as well, especially when it comes to consumer trends and analyzing behaviors and purchasing behaviors and things like that. People are going to become more informed about the food cycle. I kind of hope that happens. I'm a little nervous about it because people have opinions and it tends to muck things up. But I do think that we will eventually be using it for traceability, and that's going to be really wild. That data, pea plant, did your pea come from,
right,
in whatever place it was, and when was it planted, and what was the weather like around it? I mean, we're going to be able to track all kinds of crazy things. And I think as consumers, when do we stop, I guess, wanting to know one thing about one plant? But some people really will be fascinated and fixated on that, which I think could either drive some really interesting research moving forward, or I don't know. I'm kind of a, if you want to go down the geek portal there, but I guess there's quite a bit that could really come from that ultimately.
Yeah, there is.
But yeah, I really think that's a great answer. Sustainability. We need to be able to sustain our farming, and we need to figure out how to do it, I guess, better, but not to the point where we're changing it so much that we lose what it is. And I think people think that vertical farming and greenhouses is totally changing the game. It's not. It's just making local food.
We're going to beat the energy source that is this giant ball in the sky that throws it out.
It's true. It's true. I would like to see someone take on the sun. Go for it. But I think, I recently just started watching a sci-fi, and I know I'm behind the times, so please don't make fun of me. But I've been watching Snowpiercer, and this train that circles the Earth while the Earth is completely frozen. And it's basically a whole experiment on what society is and how we get people to live together in different class systems. But it's been fascinating because they obviously were keeping cattle on board and chickens and harvesting, and they have an ocean, and it's really absurd. But it really got me thinking about how the basic practices of farming would be observed in that situation. But you'd have to do it in a moving vehicle without pasture, right? So how does that work? And I thought, wow, that only works with tech. So it's quite interesting, like the concepts of it in that regard. And yes, I realize I'm analyzing a fantasy show, and that's fine. We can do that. Everybody's analyzing Star Trek.
I need the reco though, because I also read sci-fi to try to have more creative thought as to what is going to be possible, because people come up with things far beyond anything I've conceived.
It's true. It's absolutely true. Well, Colson, this has been a really fascinating conversation. You've definitely got my curiosity, I like pinging for sure. And I think the OT security people and anyone who works critical infrastructure in general can appreciate the fact that we really need to be more considerate when it comes to legacy knowledge, because we get bashed with that quite often about how the one person who's in the back of a factory or back of an industrial facility with the wrench who hits it at the right time is the most important person to the entire production line, yet the most overlooked person. And I think farming as a whole, there's a lot of that going on. The tribal knowledge needs to be captured in order to push forward to the next generation. So I'm glad to hear that your researchers in general are looking for that and acknowledging it, because the empathy and the human factor is so critical to farming and agriculture in general. And I think that's why a lot of people get nervous about it, because there's a lot of people, there's a lot of process. And technology is easy because it doesn't talk back to you necessarily, right?
And all the things you say you have some concern about, they're all, the way to meet them is with the resilience of the human that will decide what to do with them.
That's right.
So, right, like that is our role, is to connect them with the people who have all the data, but like we need farmers to be the influence, because they're the ones, one, that'll have to do it, but they're the ones that put the resilience into the system. Because they're the ones that, when the problems arise, they don't take no for an answer. They solve it.
That's right, because they have to, because it's probably going to mean life or death on some level. And I think that, so we need farmers to be influencing us as well as them influencing each other. I think that's probably the overarching theme.
Cool.
Great. Any final thoughts before we close off? Thank you so much for being here.
I think I'll leave us with that.
Sounds great. Thanks. Big thank you to Colson for joining me today, and thank you also for tuning in and listening to this episode. If something resonated with you, or you're walking away with a new idea or insight, please like, comment, and share the show with your network. It really does help bring in these important conversations to people who care about the future of food and agriculture. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.